And I think a lot of people want to get paid the commission on the time before the earn result has been achieved. And that's where people have problems reconciling time in their calendar because they're not actually connecting it to rewards. I mean, Joe Rogan's actually a great example of this when he talks about his routine around television. He's like, I love watching television. Like I'll watch crush an episode of Game of Thrones or stuff. But if I do it on, say, a Sunday afternoon and I kind of just show up at 11 o'clock and I sit there and, for 5 hours, just crush a couple episodes of whatever, by the end of it, I feel lethargic. I don't feel good. My brain feels fuzzy. It just doesn't feel right. But if I would have got up at, say, 5 in the morning and then did my workout routine, then I went and did a couple of recordings and I went out and did some business deals and I went out and talked to the UFC. And welcome back to the Money, the Mindset, the Mentoring podcast. Today, we've got Deniero Bartolini with us. DenieroB.com is where you will find him. And the great thing we're going to talk about right now is something that I think is really super important, is how to design the lifestyle that you're looking for. And I think that's so important for people. A lot of people think I've got to build a business. I got to focus on, revenue. I got to focus on profitability. And first it starts off with the idea of, well, let's take a step back and look at the way that you design the lifestyle that you're looking for first, and then we'll keep on building on that. So Deniero, very big welcome to you on coming to the show.
Hey, Steve, thanks for having me today.
Sweet, man. So start off, let's talk here. So number one, you're living a pretty sick lifestyle. You've spent some time in the T-Dot in Toronto. We are neighbors in that perspective. But then the other half of the time you're spending it in Rome and you're in your place over there. So you're getting the best of both worlds. And that sounds like a lifestyle by design.
Yeah, that's what we're trying to do. We got family both in Italy and Canada, and we're trying to make sure that we are close to everybody. And like I said, and like you said, actually, building a business is about creating something that can fuel your lifestyle instead of sucking the life out of you.
So talk to me about how people sort of get in the trap of, I'm going to go out, I'm going to start a business, and then the business sort of owns them, that they don't own the business. How do they fall into that trap?
But one of the things that we noticed is that when you build a business, you can optimize for several different things, right? Obviously, by the book, if you go to university, I went to university for like 6 years. We studied the idea that a business is a revenue generating machine. Okay. And so that's why you get in business, to generate revenue. And that is, in a way, it is the byproduct of what you're doing. And it does make sense. What we've also noticed is that if you spend more time not just prioritizing revenue, but prioritizing a sustainable way of building a business, then you realize that the one thing that you need to optimize first is you. Because if you are working for, 60, 70 hours a week for like a month straight, maybe you're trying to save money, and so you live in a small place and all this great stuff. And I do believe that you can create a big business if you really grind for 6 months. Sometimes it does happen. But what if it doesn't happen? What if now it's a year later, life happens, anything can happen, literally from economic problems to family problems, your own problems. And so if you don't have a solid, a solid foundation to step on, you are going to fall. And it happened to me. It happened to a majority of the clients that started working with me, because they realized that, hey, we don't want to make money, but we also want to be able to enjoy what we do today, so we don't burn out and we don't just look for the quick wins.
So when somebody gets into that, and we can see this so many times, that person starts that plumbing company or starts that, network marketing business or whatever the business they get into, software business, what are some of the indications that they're running into that destabilized base, that destabilized foundation? How do they look in the mirror and say, how do I identify that this may be happening?
So I think that that's why it's hard, right? Because on one end, you don't want to be, I used to have a friend that wanted to run a business, but he always wanted to have, for sure, always 8 hours of sleep. But instead of thinking about it the day before, he'd go to bed at 1 a.m. and then he would always wake up at 9 a.m. and always be late for everything. And he's in his own business. And so people would be like, what's happening? Well, I have to take care of my own health. So obviously that's a person that is taking it the completely different way. So again, when I mean prioritizing yourself, I mean really look at yourself in the mirror and say, am I doing as much as I'm supposed to do for, today? And if I finished what I'm supposed to do today, that's when I reward myself with my, again, things that are self-care, family time, whatever whatever stage you're in life, whatever your current family situation or lifestyle is, you want to take the time to again recharge, which is obviously, that's kind of a cliche, recharge your batteries. But realistically, how are you going to make sure that you're going to have energy throughout the day? And so a small workout at least every single day, a run, do something like that, right? A lot of people are doing cold showers. I've done them for like over a year now. I stopped. I can't get back into them now, but like you always want to do something like that. And then obviously, if you have family, if you have friends, you want to spend time with them and reconnect. And if you are working 12-hour days, that's not going to happen, because then you're going to either sacrifice your sleep to do everything else that you're supposed to do. And we can talk about even the routine trap of, we got 5 last things that I need to do today. You kind of did nothing all day. Maybe like you were, I don't know, not productive. And then you get to the last hour of the day. Oh, I got to do 5 things. And if I don't finish, I'm not productive. And so what do? You work until 2 a.m. and then you don't sleep well. And so then, you know what I mean? It happens all the time. So the important thing is that you set some standard times throughout the day. And then after that, just make sure that you have another checklist, which is your personal life and fitness and everything else.
The greatest thing there, I think, that you really pointed out is that time is really finite. You've got everybody on the planet only has 24 hours in a day, unless you're Marty McFly and have your flux capacitor and you can kind of jump through time. But even still, his perception on his time thread is 24 hours a day. Yeah. And so if you look at that and say, I'm going to take my day and I'm going to start working on the big rocks. I'm going to fill my calendar and really do really good constructive time blocking and focus on the important things. And those important things, I think what I'm really hearing from you is you need to pull from the different categories. You need to pull from the family category and say, what's important that needs to be in my calendar and it's time blocked off? Boom. What's important in my calendar that I need to block off for going to the gym? Boom. What's in my business? What's in my scale? What's in my meditation, my mindset side of things? And if you block those things off, now you can start fitting in all the other smaller blocks that are just the daily tasks that have to happen. Am I understanding correctly?
It's exactly what it is. And a lot of people, when they are thinking about building a business, they get again into that thought of, the more I do now, the more money I will make later. In some types of positions, like, I don't know, maybe lead generation, like cold calling or whatever, where it's a numbers game, and the more you do it, the better you get. So some people can get caught in that thread. And like my wife, when she started in sales, she just went all in. Within 6 months, she had a 6-figure salary from not having done sales before. She was working 7 days a week, coming in on a Sunday, calling in dentist offices when nobody was there, so that the voice message would pop up and be like, here's the dentist's phone number, the cell phone number, if there's an emergency. And then my wife Monday morning would call all the cell phones and book all the dentists and close a bunch of deals. And then people would be like, how did you do that? Well, I was working 70 hours a week. So in some positions, in some cases, it's true. The more you put in, the more you get out. But even in sales, you do that. If you work that way for 2, 3, 4 months, you're going to burn out. You are going to burn out. So it is something that you can do sometimes. When I launched the book, same thing. I was in a time crunch. I gave myself 30 days to finish the whole thing, and I did it. But then as soon as that was done, I took the time again for myself, my family. Now that went back to being my main priority, and everything else, I kind of let it unfold slowly. But the idea is that, you're not even looking at specifically just every single day needs to look the same, because then people get anxiety from having like a boring routine or something. It doesn't have to be that way. Shuffle it up. Sometimes you do, a workout in the morning if you want to. Sometimes, like, another thing that I can tell you is that when I work in in Rome, I'm 6 hours ahead of Toronto. And so I don't start my sales calls or my work calls until 3 p.m. And my workday officially ends at around 11 p.m., about 5 p.m. Eastern time. And so I've done all sorts of productivity programs where they tell you wake up early at 5 a.m. and work, until 8 a.m. and then take your daughter to school. I'm like, dude, I could do that. I wrote my book that way. But when I need to speak to people, they're in a different time zone. So I had to organize my schedule in a different way. And still, schedule changes, it's shuffled, but it still has those elements, the big rocks you're talking about, not only for business, but for your personal lifestyle as well.
Well, I think one thing that you hit was the having a meritocracy in your calendar of, you're looking at saying it's not the fact that you did something, but the fact that you did something that was impactful. For example, you said, I worked very hard for 30 days. You didn't finish that and just say, that's it. You said, I worked very hard for 30 days and I completed my book. And because I completed my book, through meritocracy, I earned the right to take that time to be able to take some time off. And I think a lot of people want to get paid the commission on the time before the earn result has been achieved. And that's where people have problems reconciling time in their calendar because they're not actually connecting it to rewards. I mean, Joe Rogan's actually a great example of this when he talks about his routine around television. He's like, I love watching television. Like I'll watch crush an episode of Game of Thrones or stuff. But if I do it on, say, a Sunday afternoon and I kind of just show up at 11 o'clock and I sit there and, for 5 hours, just crush a couple episodes of whatever, by the end of it, I feel lethargic. I don't feel good. My brain feels fuzzy. It just doesn't feel right. But if I would have got up at, say, 5 in the morning and then did my workout routine, then I went and did a couple recordings and I went out and did some business deals and I went out and talked to the UFC and met some fighters and then did this and then did this and did another training routine. And then I got down and I flopped on the couch and I looked at my day and went, man, I crushed the day. Then I decided to sit there and watch a couple episodes. It feels so much better because it was an earned privilege. It's not a given right in your system.
That is so true. And I noticed sometimes when I post stuff like this on my Instagram, I get a bunch of comments that say, that's great, that makes sense. And then I get a couple of people all the time that would say something like, oh, what kind of a life is that? Like that you have to, earn the right to have a good time or like earn the right. In a lot of these people, then you see that unfortunately, again, I'm saying these people, I am also that way sometimes. Okay, I feel like, okay, I gotta just take a break, right? And I didn't even earn it. But the idea is that if you always think that way, then you get to the point where we're talking about earlier, where the reason why people work hard is not just because I feel like the reason why people work hard is because they want to speed up the win. And that's okay. Success loves speed, like my coach Craig Ballantyne says all the time. And it's true. Delay kills dreams. Literally, that stuff is true. But also what kills dreams and could potentially kill you is trying to get 9 months, like Warren Buffett says, no matter how many women you get pregnant, you still need to wait 9 months to make a baby. There's some things like a seed. It's not like the more water you put, in the plant, in the pot, the faster it grows. You have to learn how to do the right actions today, and then go to bed or chill, leave, come back knowing the day after that you're going to do the same every single day. And if you do that, you will get results in the shortest possible amount of time that task would have taken, right?
Yeah. Well, I think what you've also just hit on the head is that success is actually really boring if you think about it. Like it's probably one of the most boring things that you could do, because if you're successful, what you're doing is you're following a model, and that model is what's getting you to that moment of success. It's not like if you look at Mr. Beast, it's like, yeah, he's an overnight success that started 20 years ago. Joe Rogan's podcast, #1, overnight success that started 15 years ago. So it's just repetitive. And it's just, I love Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu.
Yeah.
And we don't just teach somebody an armbar once and say, okay, guys, we're done. Now go to the tournament and go win it. It's like, no, we're going to repeat that over and over and over again. Because I think when you're looking at any process in your business, think like Bruce Lee. And Bruce Lee said, don't fear the person who did something once 1,000 times. Fear the person who did something 1,000 times.
Yeah. 1,000 different kicks. Yeah, I remember that exact thing. It does make sense. And you said something, you said boring. It's so true. And the thing is, the only, quote unquote, only, it's not only, but like the few fun things that you do as an entrepreneur is maybe like go out maybe with a nicer car, have a couple more vacations. They're a bit, more exciting than the average person's vacation. But that's all the stuff that you do after you worked your
Yeah.
your butt off for like months and years, right? I totally get what you're saying about the success is boring. I find that like people don't understand what it means to be, like you said, showing up every single day, no matter what, and then slowly putting, one episode, for the podcast, same thing, right? We have 635 episodes right now as well. Like,
Mm-hmm.
putting, I was looking, I think I interviewed like 450 people, and then a bunch of solo episodes that I've done. And I was like, man, how many times did I say the name of my podcast? That's insane to think about that, right? And then you get people that were like, oh, I had my podcast for like 3-4 episodes, but I'm still not getting traction. And I'm like, okay, all right.
Well, I always tell my kids this. I'm like, when you get them to try to have to focus on getting something done, and I even tell sales reps this as well, is, if somebody said, hey, how many times do you brush your teeth in your lifetime?
Yeah.
Like, shouldn't you just be able to like do it once or twice and you should be good for your life?
Yeah.
Like, shouldn't that be okay? And I was like, no, you actually, you have to do the daily maintenance of that, because success, I agree with you. Success follows attention.
Yeah.
And whatever you're focused on is what's going to be successful. So if I'm focused on going to the bar and getting hammered every day, that's going to be successful. I'll achieve that task.
Yeah.
If I'm focusing on going to the gym and training 20 hours a week, well, that task is going to be successful, because success follows attention.
That's very, very good. That's a very simple equation. And I find that the only way then to really be able to apply it, if you are constantly even in the moment, and that's actually something else that I would love to share with you, and about, going to the gym is very important, everything else, but even like some sort of like a, not even spiritual, but a way to reconnect with yourself through meditation or some other way of staying in the moment. It is absolutely crucial. I know a lot of people now are getting back, they're getting into it. I'm coming from the generation where if I talk about this with my friends, they're not entrepreneurs, they're still looking at me a bit kind of weird about it, especially people that don't do yoga or something like that, right? But realistically, I think that I am where I am today because of fitness and meditation, because the amount of stressors that I got from my business in the past like 10 years, if I didn't have that strong foundation that I was telling you, I would have been completely decimated by all the problems that my business threw at me.
Well, I think meditation can be found in so many different ways. The meditation doesn't necessarily have to be you sit up on the mountain with your hands in that sort of position, humming or something, looking up to the spirit of the forest or whatever. It doesn't have to be that way. I mean, my meditation comes through absolute violence. Like, I love violent sports like rugby. I get into this moment of purity, or like I love Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I love mixed martial arts. I love MMA, Muay Thai, anything like that. And I can get into that moment of violence where it's controlled. It's not something that nobody's angry at each other. You're just in competition, and you get this purity of thought in that moment that nothing else in the world matters, because it can't. Like, it just can't coexist with the moment of focus that you have and what you're doing. And that's what creates my moment of meditation, is being in that moment of pure competition. And specifically where there's heightened physical duress. And I think, a lot of CrossFitters can feel that way. A lot of, people in very different sports can feel that way, is that is their moment of meditation.
No, 100%. I know that, like I said, my wife she's a professional, a competitive rower. She gets in the water early in the morning, gets on her boat, and like that's her way of meditating. Like, she counts the strokes with her mind and keeps the rhythm, and she comes back after an hour completely refreshed. And so again, it's not, like I said, it doesn't have to be anything that you're praying or doing anything like that. It just needs to mean, it just means you gotta clear your head and focus on something other than your thoughts. Focus
Absolutely.
on the flow of things, and I find that that really helped me. Going back to what you were saying earlier, that success follows attention. If I don't have those moments of meditation, whether it be actual meditation or simply being in the moment, uh, then I lose myself in my thoughts and I start to pay attention to other things. And then 2, 3 hours later, I come back and I'm like, what happened here? And so back to square one. I've done this for like, I've been prioritizing that mindfulness practice in my life for about past 10 years. And I gotta
Hmm.
say, it really changed. It really changed a lot. I used to have anxiety. Even another thing helped me. I don't know if you ever heard of mewing.
Mm-mm.
So, so basically, this could be a rabbit hole. So I'll be very quick. If you want to know more, I'll let you know. So I used to not be able to breathe through my nose. I used to have those nasal strips and whatnot.
Well,
And
they're cool now. You should have been. You
yeah,
just
I
did
know
it too
Alex
soon.
Hermosi
You were
wear.
like wearing bell bottoms when other people weren't, and now you're like, I got rid of the bell bottoms. Like, wait a
Yeah,
second,
exactly. I'm like, nah,
man.
they're back in style.
Ah,
I used to be the crazy person going around this thing.
like,
I
what's
used to
wrong
wear
with you? You're just a
Nikes.
trendsetter, dude. You were a trendsetter.
Yeah.
You're just off cycle. That's all.
And so I used to have this thing, and then all of a sudden, I read that if you pushed with your tongue at the bottom of the roof of your mouth, and you gently keep to your tongue there over a extended period of time, you would actually open up your nasal passages, and you would be able to breathe a lot better without even having those straps. And so I started doing that. And the point of this was that you need to stay in the moment, and you
Yep.
need to stay focused in the what you're doing. And I had a point in my business where I started getting a lot of anxiety and stress, and I found out I couldn't breathe and whatnot. And then I started doing this thing with my mouth, and it helped me breathe, so sleep better, but also stay in the moment more. And so I started anchoring all my productive thoughts to this thing. And so I would just do this, and then while I was doing it, I knew that I had to do something productive. I
Mm.
fixed headaches, sleep problems, sleep apnea, and all that great stuff. Anxiety and like obsessive, compulsive thinking and all that great stuff that you get when you're like stressed out and burned out. Didn't take any medication. I just started doing this one practice to fix a lot of things. I just wanted to bring this up because then it became, now it's all over. Going back to trend setting, this was 2018 or 2017. Now in 2023 on TikTok, all these kids found out about it because apparently it pushes up also your jawline if you do it when you're young.
Oh, that's funny.
And so all the kids are trying to look better doing this, and they're also fixing their breathing problems. But anyway, long story short,
Well,
that's also
that
another.
one's an interesting one because the only way I know that is I used to scuba dive a lot,
No, no way.
and that's just the way that I used to, decompress or whatever it is my nasal patches, so I could equalize. And so
Yeah,
yeah, I
yeah,
just do that and everything equalizes and I can keep on diving. I didn't have to like do this like
yeah,
weird
yeah.
whatever. I just that's the way that you'd equalize.
That's true.
And
I didn't even
yeah,
know that, and
yeah.
that's then it became a practice. So anyway, long story short, that's another way of like figuring out ways to stay in the moment if you don't want to sit down and pray or whatever, meditate or whatnot.
Yeah, I think I mean a lot of times when you talk about anchoring, I think anchoring is one of those things that I think is so important when I think it comes to focus. Like my anchor when it's jujitsu is I just don't want to be choked, right? Like maybe that's, or maybe I want to choke somebody. It's one of the two. But the idea is I'm anchoring to this mechanism of movement in my mouth, and that's allowing you to kind of hone in and focus on a single thing, a singularity, so that the pluralistic thoughts in your brain, they become secondary nature to what that thing is in that moment. And whether it's you're grabbing like a this and I'm looking at this altar or this whatever, and or I'm looking at that action, I think it's the idea of just singularly purposely focusing on one thing. And I
Yeah,
think that's what gives people a lot of clarity. Whether or not it's the actual task itself, I'm not so sure about it. I mean, I don't have any expertise to say one way or the other. But I think to me that's the only thing I can think of, and that's why I love jujitsu, is because it gives me that moment of clarity. That's the only thing I can focus on.
that's true, 100%. Yeah.
That's cool. Yeah, actually, Hickson Gracie was a big guy about breathing exercises in jiu-jitsu, and he
Yeah.
was like one of the toughest dudes out there. I mean, I think the guy never really lost ever, and just went around the world just fighting everyone. And his whole thing, his whole claim to fame was, number one, Brazilian jiu-jitsu, but number two was breathing exercises. So he did all this really deep breathing. There's a name for it. I don't remember what it is. And so that was his whole moment of meditation. Like he'd go in a cold river and he'd do these breathing exercises. And that's what he felt was really the thing that kept him ahead of the game, because it gave him that ability to be able to meditate and focus.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so he took it to the next level. Yeah.
I think that that's why, again, like I sometimes read the same books over and over and over and over and over again, because if you read one book, especially, okay, if it's just a book of something you're just interested in, random topic, fine. But if it is something that really you like, a mindset book, a book where maybe there is like money practices that you haven't been, like how to retain money. This is not, knowledge is common knowledge. You need to make that knowledge part of yourself. The only way you can make knowledge part of yourself is that if you do, like through repetition of reading, like doing any action is what's going to create those new neural pathways that will make you, like you said, become like become, these things will become second nature. Then you're set. And yeah, so sometimes, like this is the funny thing. I was like, I remember I was saying this even in my book I wrote. I was like, if everybody would read something and then be able to do it right away, everybody that read Rich Dad Poor Dad would be a millionaire. But realistically, not like maybe 0.1% of the people that read that book made money. And those were the people that possibly really became obsessed with those concepts and lived through them by reading and applying them every single day, not just once and then forget about it.
Absolutely. Well, and I think most people fall in love with motivation because it's so intoxicating. I mean, feeling motivated, you go to like that event and you walk away, I'm going to do this thing. And then you get home and you're like, I'm going to do it tomorrow because today I got to play catch up. And then tomorrow comes along, oh, well, it's a kid's baseball game and I'll do it the next day. Yeah. And a week later, motivation kind of dissipates. And then next thing comes up, I'm going to be so motivated about that.
No.
Well, the problem is people, motivation is great. Goals are great. But what's really the most important thing is the discipline to action on those goals, the discipline to action on those things that you're motivated about. And then underpinning that with the willpower to stay in discipline. Because again, if you're not staying in discipline, that's going to fade away too, because motivation fades when discipline shows up when motivation doesn't.
Yeah.
But if discipline isn't fueled by willpower, discipline will fade too. And willpower is generally fed by success.
Yeah.
And so if you get these little successes here and there, like, okay, I can keep on doing this.
You know,
if you can't reconcile the discipline with success, it's going to fade too.
Yeah. I was going to say something about that, which is very interesting, because you said that willpower comes from like seeing yourself succeed, even if it's small wins. Sometimes people wonder how I stuck to my business for so many years, even when I had like personal problems, the business didn't go that well, etc., blah, blah, blah. And realistically, what happened was, after 2 months that I started selling on Amazon, it was my first business that I was like, I'm going to start selling. I had a $2,000 day. And then the day after, I had another $2,000 day. And then for like 10, 15 days in a row, I was selling 2-3 grand. I arrived at the end of the month after a few months that I'd started, and I had already made like 45 G's profit in 1 month. And I was working in sales at a telecom company in Toronto. And I realized when I opened the Amazon seller app that I had made like 5 to 6 times the amount of money that I was making by sitting at a desk, but I did it from my phone. And so that one time, that's all it took, that one time of actually seeing and tasting actual success that comes from building systems online and leveraging the fact that you are in front of billions of people potentially. That's really when I was like, okay, no matter what, I will just do this. Like, no matter what type of business it's going to be, maybe it's not Amazon anymore, right? Like, after a bit, I didn't like the idea of like dealing with like customs and like shipment. We lost a huge shipment at sea. We lost a bunch of, so after a bit, I was like, okay, this is not for me. but I still stuck to the online business world because of that reason, of that one motivator that was seeing all the money. And I'm like, if I have to work in an office 8 hours a day for the rest of my life, I might as well spend those 8 hours a day trying to figure out how to make money online. And then
Yeah,
I was like,
absolutely.
it's either 35 to 40 years in an office doing that for someone else, or by myself in my home office, and potentially after owning a big company. And so that was the one time, because before that I was like, I don't know about this money online thing. I was back in the day. It was like 20, I remember what time it was, but like it was over 10 years ago now. And so it was still like, people are still kind of iffy about the Google and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
Now things are completely different, right? Even kids are making money online, but
Oh, for sure. Absolutely. I mean, my son right now is building out his YouTube channel
no,
and just trying to grow and scale it. And he's going through a very different direction that I go. So we're going to see how well he's actually doing pretty well on it. It's like a nature oriented channel,
nice.
and it's been pretty good. And he's just he wants to get to earning on it.
Yeah.
And so he's very focused on content. But I mean, I think the next generation, when we look at their connection to technology, it's very different than ours. And I think because we were kind of introduced to technology where they were born into technology.
Yeah.
And so it's a whole different relationship that they have with it. But
Yeah.
yeah, I think the idea is, you're right. Like you have to have that inception point where you're like, and I think that's what most people focus on, is the inception point. And they focus on and say, you've got to have that. It's like whenever you talk to somebody who's an addict, Grant gets asked this all the time. Grant Cardone is what got you to quit being an addict? What was the moment? And sometimes it's a moment, then it's a failure. And then sometimes it's a moment, then it's a failure and a failure and a failure again. And then sometimes it's that moment that, okay, now you beat past the 4 or 5 failures and now you're in the clear.
Yeah.
And so the idea for you is what you're saying is that you realize, you're like, I can do this, because you saw that feed happening and you were able to connect the action to the success and make that connection point.
Yes.
Does that make sense? Or is that
100%? 100%. It's like you create a new memory, you unlock a new like gemstone or something. You realize that there's an actual goal there that you heard of, but it was something ephemeral, something that was it could be there, could not be there. Then all of a sudden you realize, you're like, yo, this is real money. Like I literally remember I was looking at the app and I was like, that's a lot of money. And then it said, we're going to deposit every 2 weeks, I believe. I don't even remember now, but I think every 2 weeks they deposit from your seller central account to your personal account, your bank account. And I remember, until I saw the money in my bank account, I was still kind of like, are these credits for Amazon? Then all of a sudden I was like, okay, I have this money. I remember that was time that I was like, okay, let's go have fun. And then from there, obviously, like I realized, I was like, I got to be careful, because now that you're playing a game with a lot more money, you can also lose more money. And so then you develop this kind of like respect for people that make money and that retain money, because making money and retaining money are two different
very different animals. Yeah.
The making money requires you to be out of the box thinking, paranoid to a certain level, always coming up with something new, figuring out how to get ahead of the competition and everything else. Whereas when you're talking about retaining your capital, most times you got to be you got to be careful. Like you don't want to waste it. And obviously some people that are entrepreneurs are very good at being, outward thinking and like wanting to do more and try more things and invest in more things, when maybe the best way to keep some capital sitting is. And so that's also what I was saying, that like you have that motivation to get started, you are there, and then all of a sudden you realize the problems are not over. Actually, now I have bigger problems.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. But the thing is, though, I love the idea of, if you've got a problem, the easiest way to solve it, the number one way to solve a problem, is to find a bigger problem. Because, I mean, if you have $100 problem, go find $1,000 problem. And guess what? If you solve that $1,000 problem, that $100 problem vaporizes.
Mhm.
So the idea of always hunting for the bigger problem that you solve will definitely solve those things that are of less value.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%, man.
Well, dude, it has been an absolute pleasure. And what I want people to do is get to know a little bit more about you with your book
Yeah.
that you have out there, get to know a little bit about how to reach you, because
Yeah.
I think, it's been an absolute great conversation. And I think clients who reach out to you are going to have a really good experience from
Yeah.
somebody who is authentic. Like there's many times where you said, look, I didn't do this perfectly, but
Yeah.
I did it. And I think that's something that is really the sign of somebody who really has done what they said they did.
Yeah, man. So yeah, the book. So I have two things going on. We have our personal brand, Deniero B, which is the reason why I wrote this book, and it's all about, like we said, lifestyle design, making sure that you create a business that's sustainable and not a business that sucks the life out of you. And so there's a bunch of different things about productivity and everything else. On the other end, we have the remote CEO, where we actually build remote teams for businesses that don't want to work directly with agencies and they want to retain more profits, obviously, and retain control of their growth with owning the marketing systems. And what we found is that on both ends, we always find the same like thread, which is people want to be able to have leverage AI, leverage systems to live better lives, not necessarily to make always more money, but now people are realizing, hey, some amount of money is enough, and then what I want to do is use AI to kind of step back from certain things that I was doing before, saving more time and spending more time with my loved ones and my family. And so that's why we found that both the program that we sell and our book and my personal brand kind of meet in the middle.
Well, I think the idea of, Grant wrote a book called Be Obsessed or Be Average.
Yeah.
And what you've really shown is that you can be obsessed, but you're obsessed about many different things. You're obsessed about your family. You're obsessed about your business. You're obsessed about your health. So by saying that I'm obsessed about my family doesn't mean that I'm not obsessed. I'm just obsessed about different categories of my
It's
life.
exactly what it is. I remember reading that book, Boba. I remember reading that book even like that, like 15 times. I don't know. Same thing. Yeah, he says that too. It's like you can be obsessed about different things, and I think that's very important. I make always time for my daughter, even if I have calls. Sometimes that happened that I had to reschedule calls because she was supposed to, she was going to leave with, someone else. And I was like, I got to be with my daughter. I got to reschedule calls. Again, priorities. And again, like you said, if you're able to get obsessed across different fields, personal and business, everything is going to grow. Maybe it's not going to grow as fast as someone that gives up their entire life. But guess what? Maybe in 10 years, you're going to be a happy person and the other person is going to be a burned out entrepreneur with a sad story to tell.
Yeah. Yeah, you're going to be fulfilled because you didn't chase happiness. You're going to be fulfilled because you chased a lot of different categories in your life. You weren't necessarily balanced. You're living an imbalanced life, but you're imbalanced because you're chasing the things that matter. Yes. And I think that's what's really important. So
100%.
Deniero, man, it's been an absolute pleasure chatting with you, brother. I really appreciate it. Enjoy the time in Rome. And hopefully when you get back across the pond here, we'll see you back in the T-Dot and we'll have some lunch somewhere. And thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks a lot, Steve. It was a pleasure being here.
Thanks, man. And guys, this is the money. This is the mindset. This is the mentoring podcast. We'll see you on the next one.